Over the summer, we took the opportunity to speak to Paul Mundy-Castle, head teacher of a large secondary school in South London, to consider how he's used the app within his school and actually the second experience of working with us at CJ Learning Technologies. Here's Paul talking about his experience of working with SMARTcurriculum.
Well, I think going into any new situation in a new school, you don't know the school. You're trying as quickly as you can to understand your school. You're getting lots of information overload as a head teacher, where your HR manager might be telling you something, your senior team are telling you something else, the kids are telling you something different, and very quickly you're trying to get to grips with actually, when you peel all that away, what does my school actually look like? And I think that can be very, very difficult. And I think what was really important at the start when I met with you and talked about how the Smart app would work was to be able to just look at raw numbers in terms of understanding my school, peeling it right back to the bare bones of actually what do we teach, how many lessons are in our current curriculum model, how many teachers, what are the roles of the teachers, who's a lead practitioner, what's their load-in, what's an NQT's load-in, what's a head of department load-in, and then being very, very evidence specific about what your school looks like. So regardless of what information you were getting from HR, business side, senior team, governors, I was very, very clear about actually what does my school look like. And I think with that information, it was a lot easier to actually plan forward, knowing what you had and where you wanted to get to. And I think without the support, I would not have been able to do it as quickly as I was able to in that school. And so moving to a new school, it made it a no-brainer to say, again, here we are, let's make sure we actually, what we think is what is happening on the ground. And I think the Smart app allows you to do that, to have that very, very finite grip of your school, which helps you to make informed decisions really, and best decisions for young people. What you don't have so much as a school leader is real insight into other schools. So I think the benchmarking ability was amazing in terms of being able to understand what modelling looks like in other schools. And I think if you just judge your school from your own school's perspective, there might be historic decisions which impact on your school, but actually it might not be a factor in other schools nationally. So I think that was something I was quite keen to look at, some benchmarking to see actually what does our offer or our curriculum design or our number of taught periods, because we have lots of guidance from the Department of Education, but with the best will in the world, they are guidance, and I think the governing body has more of an influence in terms of which guidance we stick to, letter of the law, or if a governing body, for instance, has a particular focus on work-life balance, and they make a decision to reduce their teaching load. As a head teacher coming in, you've got to sort of understand that and respect that, not come in to say, well, in my last school, main scale teachers taught X amount of lessons. So it just allows you to be able to present that type of finite comparison to governors and other stakeholders, so they're clear about the decision-making process. Yeah, I've had, I think, two different priorities, and I do think it's driven by the school. So in the first school where I utilized the program and the app, the priority was already set. It was about the curriculum itself in terms of the outcomes, and there was an impending Ofsted inspection. We knew that the results were not good enough, and we knew on paper we had experience, good teachers, but something was missing. And I think, so my priority was then actually looking at breaking down the curriculum to understand the subjects that were delivering good outcomes. Was there a difference in terms of how we delivered them, the number of hours we were given to those subjects? Was there something happening in those areas where it was actually quite marked, where the school was performing well as opposed to where it wasn't performing well? And so breaking that down from year 7 and understanding that journey right across to the sixth form was very important. So that priority was already set out. In the second school where I used the program, it was a different set of priorities because, again, the results were not a big red signal because the results were above national. It was more about understanding how to utilize the program to better support staffing and also in doing so improve outcomes by default. But at the center of it all is the young people, is ensuring that the decisions you're making are grounded enough so that young people have a better experience, and whether you come if you come to it from a teacher well-being point of view, because if a teacher is looked after, they feel supported, that's implicitly going to make them much better at delivering those outcomes for young people, or whether you look at it from a purely curriculum viewpoint in terms of actually are there subjects here we're giving too many hours to in terms of the outcomes, then I think as long as the children are in the middle of that sandwich, you can't go wrong.
No.
I think the point about reinvestment is so important. I've always been a child-centered school leader, even as a head of year, because I came up through that route. And I think for school to be successful, you have to think about the holistic journey for the young person. And I say that because it's easy to say, but not so easy to do in terms of what's that experience like for a young person? Walking past the school gate, toilets, what are they like? What's the canteen experience like? What's the hallway like? What's this assembly main hall? What does that experience look like for young people? And I think I've always used my curriculum and I'm sold on the fact that if I understand the key cost of my curriculum, I always try when I save money from the curriculum to reinvest it in the student experience. It's that a year ago, we didn't have the money to do it. But because you've realigned your curriculum, you would then see very clearly, actually, there's 90, £100,000 now in that budget. But there's always natural movement in a school, and what I've always done is I've never reacted to the natural movement. So whenever a teacher has left a school, I never go out and say, oh good, we're going to go and get another English teacher like for like or maths teacher like for like. I think it's always important you go back to your SMART curriculum and you say, well, if I take this teacher out, I've lost their 30 periods or whatever it might be, what does that do to my equation? Yes, I think as soon as you start having the open conversations, and you say the uncomfortable conversations, and you create the safe space to do that, then you get the honesty and the buy-in, which is important. In every school I've been in, I've always tried to appoint a point lead in terms of somebody who, even though it's a team effort, somebody has to take the overall responsibility for ensuring the milestones are met. The data goes in, that the data is accurate, is checked. And even though you can reach out to the team to do that, having somebody who sort of takes that ownership of delivering it, I think is really, really important. But I think once you start getting the data in and you allow people to have honest conversations about actually where are we overstaffed, because there's sometimes a gut reaction to, oh, we've got too many science teachers. But that might be because whenever you walk in the science department, they're not teaching, so you see people free, rather than actually it could be in a different area that you hadn't thought about where you have overcapacity. So I think it does allow you as a leadership team to have really honest conversations about where the school really lies in terms of capacity.
A lot of the training that I've done recently has been around how do you create the conversation among the team. So you've got the educationalists and you've got the business and finance leads, and there's a tension between them. It's not an animosity, but it's just they're talking different languages. You've got KPIs in one group and you've got performance figures in another, and that one is saying I need the teachers to be able to teach, and the others are saying, well, I've got to balance the budget. It's the question of how do you get. And that's what we've tried to do with the app, in terms of giving you the information that they can share.
And I think it's really important. This doesn't live with just the leadership team. I've always involved my whole finance team in terms of them actually feeling part of the teaching decisions, because sometimes they're at the other side where they are making sure bills are paid and they see the financial constraints that sometimes teaching, people with teaching responsibility might not see. So it does give you a way of bringing those two teams together, because essentially it empowers your finance team to also see things from a teaching and learning perspective, and understanding why you need Slack in the English department or the maths department, because ultimately you can't timetable 8 maths teachers on at the same time because of the way the school actually functions. So I've always found that relationship really good in terms of building the database, involving everybody in it, but more importantly, when it comes to seeing what comes out of the data we've put in, being able to share that globally with everybody around the team, so everybody has a better understanding of those animosities between, or the challenges between the two very important drivers in school in terms of teaching and finance.
What we've found is that there's as much about the language that they're using, the KPI, budget-driven stuff is around, okay, we've set our budget, we need to keep with it. You've got challenges going on in the education world,
and you have to react to it.
You do.
Yeah.
You have to respond, and and it may be you take an opportunity. 2 maths teachers turned up, and do we take both of them, because actually that gives us an opportunity that we can use in the future. Or one of them's got a second subject which we can use half of their time for an economics A level.
But you'd only know that if you've got a really finite mapping of your own curriculum needs. So that second subject would ring a bell if actually we're a little bit down on Spanish hours. So knowing that even if you've got a second subject but it's not in an area you need, then it's a different conversation. But being clear about where there is opportunity to sort of find people to plug the gap, it makes it so much easier. Well, yeah, I see COVID as a huge opportunity. I've had a personal belief, which is one I've held, that we haven't done well enough in schools. When you think about at the end of secondary education, you're talking maybe 55% of the school 16-year-olds leave with gold standard qualifications. Your old money 5 subjects at 5 or above, or the old money 5 A to C. So you are condemning another 46% who just didn't make that benchmark. And after the years of investment in primary and secondary education, I just don't think that's good enough. So I think COVID offers us a different opportunity to work smarter. I think the explosion of technology and how we can better use technology to make sure kids are not left behind. Every school had to move to some sort of online learning, and that's given us a chance to really develop that platform, whether it's Google Classroom or Teams, how we've taught remote lessons. You now have a new world where actually you could stick a camera in the back of your classroom, broadcast the lesson on Teams. You're processing the 25, 26 kids in front of you, but there might be another 4 who are at home for whatever reason, and straight away they have no reason to not engage in a lesson, even if they're ill at home, but were well enough to participate in a lesson. So I think there's an opportunity there to say, well, how do we deliver content in a slightly different way? And I think building content for the online classroom is something else. It's an area that schools will have to sort of appreciate and take on board. Say, well, actually, how can we make a lesson still engaging for young people who are not physically in the classroom? How can we make that more interactive? How can we allow them a voice into that online platform? Because we're told we have to learn to live with COVID. So there might be different variants that are going to come along. That might mean actually we go back to a state of partial lockdown, and schools just need to be ready to be able to process that. I think well-being has been a real big issue now in terms of what's gone on, and how do we look after vulnerable teachers as well. And I mean, we had lots of examples where kids were in school but the teachers weren't. So in this instance, it was teachers delivering the lessons from their front room and the kids in the classroom with a cover supervisor, sort of managing the behaviour, but work itself being delivered by that trained qualified teacher. So I think that's another area that we are looking at in terms of how do we enrich the learning itself. And I also think the built environment has been a real topic across the country over this COVID period. Talking about ventilation, talking about the size of classrooms, have we got the buildings in 2021 that are fit for purpose, because it can be potluck depending on which part of the country you're in. What does your school look like? Is it one of the new build schools, or have you got a school that was built in 1930, still has a small corridors, small classrooms, and how do we actually meet that challenge effectively without bankrupting the government? Because essentially it's not we need more money, it's about maybe being smarter with the money that we do have. And the other big issue I think for us to consider in terms of COVID is the legacy education that the kids have missed. Because ultimately at the start of COVID, there was a lot of shutdown, and a lot of the online learning was given out but not necessarily measured in terms of how far have these young people travelled. So I know there's talk about how we reshape the curriculum, maybe actually condense the curriculum for the current year 10s and 11s so that they are able to access public exams next year. But are we then robbing those children of their right to a full and broad offer? Because if you condense your history curriculum, I'm a history teacher, you say, well, we're only going to teach these 5 topics, then essentially in 20 years' time, would that young person be able to have a conversation in a pub about an element of history that they never got a chance to be exposed to?
Yeah.
So how do we wrap that around? How do we create more space within our school day to allow a fuller curriculum? Obviously, it might be Saturday intervention, it might be lunchtime, it might be after school, but we've got to think creatively. I think condensing the curriculum just to help young people pass exams takes us back to where we are now, where 54% of the young people do relatively well, and 46% don't.
Picking up on what so take the two questions I've just asked you. You've got the opportunities of blended learning, and are we just going to forget that and just say, well, okay, we'll come back to normal education, and we've got a problem because we've missed over the content, so let's condense it? Where we're missing a trick in the sense of the reason I asked the question is that one of the schools we work with started at COVID and said, actually, here's an opportunity. I'm going to use my surplus staff and I'm going to turn them into online tutors. Now, that school is still, they've got 3 contracted members of staff who would have been full-time in the classroom and are now full-time online. Well, between them, they're covering a full timetable because they see the implications of exactly as you said, moving forward, an uncertain future, face-to-face not necessarily being permanent, some kind of blended experience being there. So they've taken the opportunity of the data that they know within the app and said, well, actually, here's a future for us. Let's do something that's online. Now, that has implications for excluded pupils, school refusers, the challenge when they come to get them in the classroom. And we know that some learners have really engaged with online learning where they didn't.
As a model.
As a model. So are we at a point, a kind of hiatus of change? Is that?
Yeah, I think we have to allow some natural osmosis here in terms of, I think this is an opportunity for lots of schools, lots of school leaders to try different things, because essentially we'll then be able to evaluate to see actually where the real success is and what's been the cost of that success. For instance, in terms of blended learning, I don't think we should ever go away from that now, because ultimately there is a huge opportunity. And if for instance, I was talking about history, talking about we're condensing the curriculum, yes, to allow the young people to have a fighting chance at doing well at a public exam, but it doesn't stop us from building those lessons and then shifting them to online, where actually this might not be in your covered exam content, but we think is a big part of the history curriculum that you should learn. And if we make that accessible, then you're now empowering families, family members, parents to work at home with those young people to say, look, it's not essential, but it's desirable that you learn about this, even though we know you won't be examined on it when you sit in the summer for your public exams. And I think the only way you can do that is by a way of creating some blended learning opportunities where, and those kids then have to have a right to come back. So how do you then build in a structure where every fortnight you might have a Q&A around, actually you've been looking at hyperinflation in Nazi Germany, which we know you might not need to cover, but now from that group of lessons, we're going to have an open forum, we're going to have a discussion, you can ask questions, the teacher's then able to interject and clarify misconceptions, where you're having those regular subject surgeries,
Yeah.
maybe, to say, well, you've done this on your own. You might have had your parents helping you. You've had a support of a textbook and some websites and some video clips, but now you've got access to me, for this 1 hour seminar where we can just talk around the subjects. Because I think what's really important, the things we do best as classroom teachers is the bits of the curriculum or the hot bits in history that might not be written down in books that help kids to make connections. And I think we should still be able to offer that opportunity. So I do think there's going to be change, and I think schools should naturally be allowed to see what that change looks like for them. And having a full understanding of your own capacity as a school through the SMART app, for instance, would then ensure you actually know where your capacity is.
Yes.
And if you're going to be creative, you can be creative without breaking the bank. It's not, oh gosh, we're going to do this. Actually, it might be within your current capacity to say, let's find a creative way of doing it. I've seen some really creative things that's happened across the country during this period of COVID, and I think it would be a shame if in September kids are back in school full time. We always know there's going to be kids who got reasons why they might not be in school, and I know some families are still unsure about the face masks and how their children will be, especially if they've got issues around their own personal health, and they might actually, their immune system might not be as strong as other young people. That we don't turn that off, and we keep working on how we can make sure we're providing a good quality of education across the board.
That's the it is about making that insightful judgment. I've got an opportunity here, and I've got some capacity. Therefore, I can invest in students. We've seen we're often asked about so what's the threshold of class size? So we'll stop doing things because we've got less than 10 children in the class. But we know some trusts, particularly, that are saying, we may have 4 secondary schools. Well, perhaps we haven't got enough music to deliver music lessons in each of the schools. But we could do a blended experience where 4 of them are offering some online provision and some peripatetic tutoring, so that they'll get to their GCSE and it will be by a blended experience. Others are doing it with computing. Others are doing it with some of the smaller subjects that you wouldn't necessarily get a full class. Rather than saying to children now,
you can't do it. Yeah.
Well, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Now, collaboration, we talk about sort of federated experiences, or, a local group getting together, rather than the consortiums that we've had in the past.
Yeah.
But some of that being delivered on an online provision is really powerful. It's a great opportunity.
And it allows kids to have choice as well, which is really important, because if they're committed to the subject, then they will make the sacrifice. If they realise that sacrifice means doing a bit more on your own or doing it in a slightly different way, but it still allows you the opportunity to complete that qualification. Yeah. I remember a couple of years ago running an astronomy GCSE in a school I was in Luton, where I was a senior manager, and we found 12 young people who were committed to getting this additional GCSE, but they had to commit to their own Saturdays. It was with the observatory in Greenwich, but they were committed to going there on a Saturday and doing the work, because they wanted this additional GCSE. So I think young people have always shown resilience if they want something enough, and you sort of offer them a pathway to get it, even if there is a personal sacrifice. I think the end goal justifies the sacrifice. So I think finding a way of still offering a very diverse and broad curriculum, even if you offer the add-on subjects in a slightly different way, I think could have real benefits for young people. A typical example for me at Woodcote, where I am the head teacher. Last year, when we were looking at a curriculum, after actually using Smart App and seeing where we were and what we needed, we lost a teacher. We lost an English teacher, and the default position was go and replace that English teacher. But we then looked at our staffing, and we had capacity in the humanities department, over capacity, to actually cover Key Stage 3 English. So what we did was turned the 10 periods a fortnight we gave to English, 2 of them became reading and literacy lessons. So essentially my English department were able to plan this scheme of work, which was purely based around reading, but they could be delivered very effectively by humanities teachers. But it meant it saved us a whole teacher's salary, because we didn't have to go and get that English teacher. But more importantly, it allowed me for the first time to buy a product from the local college, where East Surrey College, where I was able to send 12 young people every Monday to do 3 vocational courses, hair and beauty, motor mechanics, and plumbing. And those 12 kids in the end who we sent to college every Monday, we were able to timetable so that on a Monday they would not be missing out on their core subjects of maths, English or science. But the money we paid East Surrey College meant the money we effectively saved from an English teacher we didn't necessarily need. Would have been desirable to have one because it made it easier to run the timetable, but allowed those young people, those 12 young people, our commitment then was to make sure we had somebody to drive the minibus every Monday, take them to East Surrey College, stay there with them to sort of support them through the day, and then bring them back half a day a week. But it meant those kids that were doing a level 1 course, that at post 16 they could transition quite easily to the level 2, hair and beauty, things that we couldn't offer to any capacity in our school. And I think you then saw the engagement of those kids when they came back to school, knowing that even your behavior, if you don't, because we made them all sign a contract, because we sold this as we're offering you this, nobody else is getting this, it's costing us a lot of money, but we're investing in you because we know this is what you've told us you want to do, and we can't offer it at the school. And I think the turnaround in terms of their own engagement when they came back to school, but it meant they lost an option that they would have been poorly suited to take anyway. So pushing them into a history GCSE or a music GCSE because that's what's in the block, it's not going to work. But creating this in an add-on, even though it's delivered externally, was only possible because we knew implicitly what our staffing was and where capacity was. And humanities teachers, I mean, I'm a history teacher, but I've taught English. There's a lot of crossover skills. And as long as you package it right, you then are also looking after the well-being of those humanities teachers, because they know they're not responsible for 80% of the English curriculum. They're responsible for a reading element, which is it's transformational across the school. They need literacy and reading. So ultimately, and the scheme of work was planned for them. So it's all that background work to actually make it work better. But the end result is you're impacting so positively on young people just because of a decision not to bring an additional English teacher in. And I think it's really, really powerful to understand how you can creatively model your curriculum and actually have an impact.
The reality of that is that's £56,000 roughly that you're
saving,
not saving, you're reinvesting in a different way.
And saving, because actually the cost of the college course, the 3 college courses, was about half what that teacher would have been. So effectively you're offering more, but for less money. You're offering more to the young people for less. But
that's putting the investment in a different place, so it does the job differently. I mean, our experience tells us that most secondary schools of any size, there's a capacity of about £250,000, and that's usually in surplus teaching staff sitting there, roughly £2,000 a period. But if having £250,000 to think about spending differently, this is not just about saving money. It's about
reinvesting.
Where's it best going to be used to either to engage the children or to get a better result out of that process.